From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. This evening, we are talking defensive backs. A guy, Nick Ferguson, in studio, seems aptly qualified to have that conversation. What up, Nick?
What's going on, man?
It's good to have you here. And listen, man, the Broncos believe in Demari Mathis. I think if we come through this entire process of free agency, still have the draft on the other side, but knowing that they don't have a first or second rounder yet, as we say here with 2/3, a fourth, fifth, I think is sixth, something like that. You have 5 total picks. Point being is the Broncos, by not bringing in a cornerback other than Tremon Smith, who's going to be more of a gadget guy, it's a belief in Demari Mathis. You like that?
Yeah, of course. First, let me start by saying this. It's another guy who has played well, and that's under George Paton's stewardship. And when you look at the long line of guys that he's drafted, we've seen more and more guys have increased playing time. Let's be totally honest. Demari Mathis had his struggles last year. I go back to the Chargers game. I think he had like 2, 3. Oh, it's 4. Thank you.
Yep.
Pass
not 1, not 2, not 3.
But 4 pass interference calls. But for me, being a former guy that played a position and coached a position, basically all it was is just trying to get your head around and not panicking, because most guys panic in those situations. But the one thing that I was so happy was that he did not allow that to really kind of take away his confidence. And that's the biggest thing when you play that corner position. Yeah, the skill set and all that is part of it, but you need to have guys who are confident, because at some point you're going to get beat. It's part of it. And can you rebound from it? But he also showed that he wasn't just a willing tackler. And being a willing tackler was like, oh, there's a guy in front of me, I guess I have to tackle him. No, he was a guy that actually wanted to go out there and make plays. So he has all the physical tools that you want to be opposite of PS2, and obviously playing opposite him. Mm-hmm. You're going to see a lot more balls, so that means that your development is going to happen a lot quicker. So I'm happy with Demari Mathis.
And I really do believe, because George Paton has so far done this, I believe that the Broncos will probably draft another cornerback. I mean, why not, right? You got to continue to add to that room. They brought back Isang Bassi, but he tends to be more of a slot receiver or slot corner for them, a nickel. So I think in the way we look at this is, the starters, you have Pat Surtain, of course, who looks like he's continuing to ascend. Demari Mathis opposite side, K'Wan Williams will be your nickel, and then the 2 safeties, and we'll talk about them here in a second. But that setup, especially knowing that with Vance Joseph as defensive coordinator, you're going to be bringing more pressure. You're going to be bringing more blitzes. That puts a lot more pressure on those defensive backs, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And in the world of being a DB, especially playing on the island corner, it's very difficult. Most people sit at home, the armchair quarterback, well, he should have did this, he should have done that. Well, I'll tell you this, put you out there and see what you would have done. But yeah, I love the idea and the fact that, Vance somewhat played that position before. Mm-hmm. And so he's quite familiar with it, but also I love the idea of bringing pressure. Now, over the past couple of years, we've seen, the defensive coordinators in the past bring pressure, but not the way that I think Vance wants to do it. And to be able to bring that type of consistent pressure, you're going to have to be able to hold up in the back end. Now, we're not talking about, the Al Davis rule of things. We playing man coverage all day, 24/7. No, being able to mix up your coverages, but your guys are going to need to be able to hold up. And I love what you were saying about the Broncos are going to take a corner, right? Either they're going to draft one, they're going to pick a couple up in free agency, because there's a lot of guys in this upcoming draft, and not everyone's going to be drafted, but we know so many teams run 11 personnel. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs. The whole idea was, how do you stop Travis Kelce? You can't put a safety on him. You can't put a linebacker. But if you get a DB that kind of matches up with him, and you can put PS2 on him, and then you can put Demari on one side and another corner outside, it gives you some opportunities with your scheme. So I'm looking forward to seeing more DBs come into the building.
I knew you'd be excited about this topic. Yeah. And again, corners especially, we live in an era right now where you're starting to see the shift in value of having the high-end guys back there, right? Because you just brought it up. Teams are looking for those mismatches. And right now it's either the big receiver, it's the big tight end, it's speed, right? And so if you're going to match other teams' speed and their other teams' ability to get you out of position, you need to match that with athleticism and sometimes length like PS2 has. So I think that's an interesting shift we're seeing right now in the valuation of players on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, that's the way you have to evaluate guys. The idea is that, okay, well, what are the other teams doing in your division? okay, if they're going out and grabbing 4, 5, 6 wide receivers, we have to make sure that we have our track team of our own to kind of isolate those individuals. But for me, so much when we talk about football is always about the X and the Y. The biggest position for me is the slot position. That's why you have more space. So being as though you have multiple guys that can play that position. K'Wan Williams is a great one. I mean, I've been around him in my time in San Francisco. He's had his injuries, but you want a guy just in case something happens. And we know this is a physical game. Not everyone's going to play, 17 games now?
17 games now.
Every player's not going to play every single game. So you need to have guys that you can actually lean on. But it also helps you, too, if you bring rookies in and you started developing those guys. When your veterans start to prove that, hey, listen, they command a hefty paycheck, you know what? We're okay. Let that guy go because we have 2 other guys in the waiting.
All right, let's get to the safety position because we know Justin Simmons locked in to be the starter. Kareem Jackson, I guess there's always a scenario where he said he wants to continue playing in his career. We'll see on that. But right now, the room looks like Caden Stearns and P.J. Locke. Who best fits what Vance Joseph's going to want to run?
I'm going to say Caden. And I know right now Caden's coming off, I believe, a hip injury. So we have to see, where he's at with that injury. But if he is 100% healthy, I think he is a great fit. When he was drafted out of Texas, I thought he should have gone higher, but I totally understand the draft process. But he was a guy that Vic Fangio trusted early in the process to actually put him out on the field and say, okay, here's a multitude of things that we want you to do. And as a rookie, I can tell you, man, your head is spinning because you're walking into the building and there's no cohesiveness with the playbook. But Caden seemed like he was able to adjust playing the safety position and then coming down and playing something like a rover position, an extra linebacker, but being in a DB body. He was able to do that, and he did it well, and he made plays. That's what this game is about, making plays. And listen, nothing against, P.J. Locke. He's just going to have to elevate his game this year. But if you have Simmons next to Caden Stearns, now we're talking.
Right, and I love Caden Stearns' game. He's a ball hawk. He's a guy that just always seems to be willing to make a play. What about the match of those two? Because one of the reasons why Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson work so well together is the communication. They also have different skill sets. Sometimes it feels like there's a bit of an overlap with Caden Stearns and Justin Simmons on what they do well between a strong safety and a free safety. So maybe you can explain a little bit about why those two will work well together. Well,
the reason they work well together, both smart guys. And the biggest thing is versatility. I mean, when you think about Simmons and you think about KJ, 2 different guys, you knew which guy was the strong safety, which guy was the free safety.
Right.
So it made it easier to scheme against those guys. Just like when I played here with John Lynch, by title, we played different positions. One free, one strong. But we would rotate. So, teams wouldn't be able to isolate us and just kind of pick us apart based on our individual weaknesses. So this is where Caden Stearns and Justin Simmons, that chemistry, man, it's always been there. I mean, I just told you that Caden Stearns, they moved him down in the box.
Yep, they did.
And what would happen when Simmons and KJ were on the field? You would bring KJ down sometimes, but the better guy who was better at blitzing was Justin Simmons. And when you see that, now you can take advantage of KJ because KJ didn't have the same type of range, that Simmons had. And we saw this go back really quickly to the Raiders game, right? KJ, I believe he was in the middle of the field on one of those touchdowns on PS2. But guess what? He's not used to being that man in the middle.
Good point.
And that's what makes him a little, I guess, deficient. And I don't know if the team should bring him back. I don't hate on any player.
No.
But based on schematics and what you want to do with your roster, I don't think he's a good fit in this defense.
It's a good point you bring up. And I like what you talked about with the versatility is again, there's ways you can attack when it's Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons on the field versus if you have 2 guys that are a bit interchangeable. And I like that point. I do think there's a role, though, again, more of a box safety, an inside linebacker role kind of thing with Kareem Jackson. He's a really good tackler. And there's something, last thing on this, there's something that I think is very unique and important about sending a message through physicality and through the big ooh hit kind of thing. And Kareem Jackson's one of those guys. He's one of those dudes. And he obviously within the rules, but he does that. He's done that over the course of his entire career. And the Broncos don't have a lot of thumpers, at least not the way he does it. So for me, there is value in that.
Well, there is from setting the tone, right? Setting the tone. And yes, we used to call them woo licks, right?
Right,
Because the crowd go, woo. That was the whole thing. And yet when you look at Simmons doesn't seem to possess that physicality. So for him, I mean, he said it during his contract year. He was like, look, my job is to go out there and make plays. And if you want a guy that can roam sideline to sideline and get you those interceptions, he is your guy. Now, with Simmons, would you like for him to be more physical? Yeah. But in today's NFL, you really don't have to. Are you a great open field tackler? At the end of the day, did the guy get past you? The answer is no. You've done your job. So this is why I feel as though this offense, or this defense rather, can function without a guy like K-Jack, because you still have a guy like Caden Stearns who may not possess all the physicality that K-Jack brings, but he still has that physical nature about him.
I have one last question. Is Pat Surtain the best cornerback in the league? And if not now, will it be soon?
I'm going to say yes. It sounds biased, and I get that, but what I lean on is at the end of the day, I had an opportunity to play and practice with by far the best corner in the NFL. I know there's Deion Sanders out there, but Champ Bailey was the best overall corner, not cover corner, overall corner, because he covered and he tackled. And that's what I see in PSU. And his ability to tackle has definitely changed from year one to year two. And when you watch him at practice, for me, I see, a lot of Champ Bailey in him. And sometimes right after practice, I'll call Champ and I'm like, look, dude, you're never going to guess what this kid just did. And we always talk about his footwork. That's the biggest thing for a corner in surviving in this league, footwork. So, yes, he is by far the best corners in the league. I know people talk about Sauce Gardner. If you actually watch Sauce, his technique isn't as clean. I mean, eventually he would get there, but right now it is PS2.
Preach. Love it. For Nick Ferguson, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win it! You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.